I've been meaning to comment on this a couple of days ago, but I guess now's better than never. Um, this year is apparently the gift that keeps on giving with all these upcoming releases and all these announcements for future releases of upcoming video games. We learned a few days ago that Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core is finally getting remastered, and it's going to be in HD. It's going to be released for the PlayStation 5. It looks like it's going to be an exclusive for the PS5 based on what we know. I mean, it could eventually appear on other game consoles a little bit later down the line, but for now, we do know that Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion will be appearing a little bit later this year on the PS5. It's supposed to be appearing sometime, I guess, between November and December because it's been confirmed that it's going to be released during the winter of this year of 2022. And for those, I'm pretty sure a lot of you know, Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, the original version of the game, came out back in 2007 for the PSP, and the game was actually pretty good. A lot of people like the plot and the gameplay and all that stuff. It holds up pretty well for a 2000s game, but I feel that Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, when it was first released, it was released exclusively for the wrong game system because the PlayStation 3 was more popular than the PSP, and the PSP got overshadowed by the Nintendo DS as far as handheld game systems is concerned. And as far as sales is concerned, I believe Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core didn't even reach 1 million in terms of sales, and I think that game is actually supposed to be a prequel to the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy VII game, which came out back in 1997 for the PS1, which reached over 10 million copies in sales on the PS1. And I believe that may have been like the second best-selling game on the PS1 behind Gran Turismo. And I do feel that Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion, the trailer looked very impressive, and the plot is also very intriguing as well, with the main character being Zack Fair, who basically pretty much you learn that he's on a special mission to find a missing soldier called Genesis or Project G, which was mentioned in the trailer, and we all saw what happened to Zack Fair in Final Fantasy VII, the original game, how he was brutally gunned down. But if you looked at the graphics and the physics from the original PS1 game with all the blocky designs and stuff, it looked kind of funny, even though it's very tragic. I mean, if you look at the I guess like the PSP version of Zack Fair's alleged death, it looks more tragic, and I don't know, it's like the storytelling aspect of Crisis Core was better than that of the original Final Fantasy VII game, mainly because you had great voice acting, you had better physics and better gameplay design and all that stuff. And the graphics and the visual design of Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion looks absolutely amazing, and honestly, I can't wait till that game is released a little bit later this year. And another game that people are looking forward to seeing a little bit later down the line is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which was also mentioned like around the same time that the Crisis Core Reunion was mentioned, and the trailer came out, and the trailer for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was also intriguing because apparently that game is supposed to be a direct sequel to the Final Fantasy VII Remake game that came out back in 2020. It's considered to be part 2 and was supposed to be a trilogy of games within the Final Fantasy VII series. And we do know that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, or, Final Fantasy VII Part 2 is supposed to be released sometime in between late 2023 and early 2024, and I believe production for Final Fantasy VII Part 3 is currently in development, but we have no idea when it's going to be released. Most likely it's going to be released a little bit later down the line, probably, or hopefully sometime between 2025, 2026, but yeah, I feel that the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I think the brand new story, along with the name value of the Final Fantasy VII game itself, will be enough to get people interested in purchasing it when it comes out for the PS5. Because unfortunately, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is supposed to be a PlayStation 5 exclusive when it comes out in the future. As far as Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion, I believe this is supposed to be on multiple game systems, including the PS5, Xbox Series X, and Nintendo Switch, along with Steam. So Square Enix is definitely doing like impressive things with the Final Fantasy VII name, and honestly, Final Fantasy VII is arguably the greatest game within the entire Final Fantasy series. So it doesn't surprise me that Square Enix is basically trying to do as much as they can with Final Fantasy VII in terms of creating new stories or extending the story or explaining things that were never explained, in the past about Final Fantasy VII. And this is all coming shortly after we learn more about Final Fantasy 16, which I believe is supposed to be coming out next year, next summer, if I'm not mistaken. It's definitely coming out sometime in 2023, and it seems like the next 2-3 years is going to be really big for the Final Fantasy VII series, and it's going to be big for the Final Fantasy series in general. Now, in terms of what's more popular, what game that people are looking forward to more between Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth and Final Fantasy 7 Crisis Core Reunion, who knows? But all those games sound very intriguing, and it's going to be interesting to see how popular each of those games are on the PlayStation 5 in the future.